County Board of County Commissioners Board Work Session for Wednesday, December 1st, 2021, 2:32 p.m. My name is Ty Mentor, Chair of the Board. Vice Chair Commissioner Gary Edgewords to my left. County Manager Miro Chavez to his left. Commissioner Carolina Mejia to my right. Assistant County Manager Robin Campbell. We have a topic today regarding Development Code Docket CR5, Places of Worship Code Amendment. Community Planning Economic Development Director Josh Cummings, Maya Teeple, one of our senior planners, and Krish Poe as well from Community Planning, our interim planning manager. And I think that covers everybody. The public can follow along on the YouTube channel, and we've got a half an hour slated. I guess I'll go straight to Josh.
Great, thank you, Commissioner. This will be Maya's presentation, but I wanted to take this opportunity to again say thank you to the Board of County Commissioners and the Planning Commission. We are, as staff, moving the docket items along as prioritized by the Board of County Commissioners, and this is another step forward in serving the citizens of Thurston County and the applications that they make in the Development Code docket. So I wanted to just, again, provide that perspective that this is our work under your direction, and thank you for the continued support. I'm going to go off camera and let Maya take it away.
Great. Thank you, Commissioners. Maya Teeple, Senior Planner with Community Planning. I do have a short PowerPoint, so I will go ahead and share my screen. And hopefully that's visible to everyone now. This PowerPoint is included in your packet if you'd like to follow along. So we are discussing the Places of Worship Development Code Amendment today. It's a short briefing, 30 minutes, so I'm going to ask that you hold your questions until the end. My presentation is fairly short, so we will have time to go through those. So going over this code amendment a little bit, I'll provide some background on what the code amendment request is and also what the current county code states. And then I will go through the Planning Commission recommendation. At this briefing, we are requesting direction from the Board of County Commissioners to whether or not to move forward and set a public hearing on this item, and also on which options they would like included in that public hearing. So background on the code amendment. This is docket item CR5 on the 2020-2021 official development code docket. And this item was first added to the docket in 2020, and staff was not assigned to begin working on this item until earlier this year. So in early 2021, we assigned staff to work on this based on the priorities of the board. Originally, this was 6 out of 7 citizen-initiated projects that we had received ranked by the board, and 3 of those were complete last year. So of the remaining 3, it was 2 out of 3. And the request of the applicant is that they want to be able to house students interested in faith on site of their property while training them. So kind of like a school, a live-in school. And the code does currently allow for certain types of residential uses with places of worship, as long as they meet the underlying requirements of that zoning district. However, the type of residential use that the applicant wants to do on their property is not currently allowed in their zoning district. So the options that you'll see is really to meet that need of the applicant. And this code change does only apply to Title 23, which is the Olympia Urban Growth Area zoning district. So it is not all of Thurston County. It does not include the other UGAs. It is only within the Olympia Urban Growth Area. So going through what the current county code language says, current county code does allow for places of worship to be permitted in all residential districts within the Olympia Urban Growth Area. And those are permitted through a special use permit. So this is just an excerpt of the table that is in the county code. You can see all of these are residential districts, R1 to 5, RLI, etc. And S stands for special use permits. So places of worship and churches are permitted in all of those residential districts, and including on the applicant's property. And dwelling units, such as dormitories or single-family homes and associated uses, can be permitted with a place of worship, but they are considered separate uses. So what that means is they're subject to the regulations in that specific zoning district. So this is an excerpt of dormitories. That is what the applicant's desired use would fall under. And currently, dormitories are only permitted within the Olympia urban growth area in rural 1 to 5, RLI 2 to 4, multifamily residential 10 to 18, and RM 18. So these higher density zoning districts, and then R1 to 5 and RL 2 to 4. The applicant's zones on the property are R4 and R4 to 8. So currently in the county code, they cannot apply for a dormitory on their property. And that is why they submitted this request. So there were 3 options that were presented to the Planning Commission for their public hearing, and none of these options change the actual permitting process or how associated uses are reviewed under our current code. They only change the types of uses that can be allowed within certain zoning districts. So options 1 and 2 expand the allowable zones where dormitories can be permitted to R4 and R4 to 8, which covers the applicant's property. And it also only allows dorms to be permitted in those zones with a place of worship. So it's pretty narrow. It's limited in allowing dorms only with a place of worship as opposed to across the board. And it does require a special use permit for the dorms within those 2 zones where we would propose to expand it to. Option 2 is the same as option 1, but it also includes regulatory language to limit the size and scale of the dormitories permitted with a place of worship. And the version that was originally included for the Planning Commission hearing had 2 suggestions, 2 methods on how to regulate size and scale. And the Planning Commission did further refine that option ultimately. So you'll see a modified option 2 with the Planning Commission recommendation. And I'll go into a bit more detail on that towards the end of the presentation. And then option 3 takes a different approach. It doesn't expand the zones where dormitories can be permitted, but it does allow for different types of associated uses like guest houses and single room occupancies. And this option was developed as an alternative, a less impactful alternative in coordination with the City of Olympia. However, it does not meet the applicant's needs because these types of uses, single room occupancies would not be allowed in the zones on their property, and guest houses are very limited in the size that they can be developed. So they likely wouldn't be able to house the number of students that they want with a guest house option. So this doesn't meet the need of the applicant, but the Planning Commission did want to allow the public to comment on it. So it was included in the Planning Commission public hearing. And to just show a map of what this means for the Olympia urban growth area. So the blue areas are where dormitories are currently allowed within the Olympia urban growth area. It's around 700 acres. And they're allowed on properties. They don't need to be with a place of worship in the blue. The pink is where options 1 and 2 would expand to allow dormitories. However, it would only allow it with a place of worship. So it's quite a big area of expansion, but it's narrow in what type of uses dormitories could be associated with. Consistency with the county code and the comprehensive plan. All 3 of the options and the modified Planning Commission option are consistent with how the county code processes and permits other types of associated uses. So we did look into how the rural county and other urban growth areas would permit dwelling units or other types of associated uses with a place of worship. And it's very similar to how it's currently permitted within the Olympia urban growth area. So there's no changes recommended to that permitting process. all of the separate uses would still be subject to the underlying zoning regulations. And all of the options developed, including the Planning Commission recommended modified version of option 2, are consistent with the comprehensive plan and also with the joint plan of Olympia. And goals within those two plans are generally aimed at maintaining consistency and transparency across land use permits. So these options do meet those goals. I do want to talk a little bit about involvement with the City of Olympia, since this does impact the Olympia urban growth area. So staff did work with the City of Olympia in order to draft the code options that moved forward, and we began that process before ever going to Planning Commission, but throughout the Planning Commission process, we did coordinate with the city to get their feedback. It is worth noting that any option that is approved would result in allowing dormitories in areas that they're not currently allowed within the City of Olympia. So for options 1 and 2 and the modified Planning Commission option, they would allow for dorms in R4 and R4 to 8. However, the City of Olympia does not allow for dorms in those locations. So what that means is there could be some inconsistency if places are annexed and these land use regulations are different, unless the city chooses to update their code at a later time. The city did provide comment throughout the process, and they requested that a clear connection be made between a dorm and the on-site use. And the point of that is to reduce cases where we might have property that's owned by a church that is, there's not a church actively cited on that. Maybe it's a vacant property, and they come in and they put a dorm on the property. And the city also recommended that dorms be limited in size, scale, and function relative to the principal use. So they did talk a little bit in their comments to us before we ever got to the Planning Commission public hearing that square footage and limiting size based on bed number and room number or even occupant number is an option, but limiting only by requiring the dorm to be accessory to the principal use on site, like the church, addresses a broader range of future uses. It's more flexible for the applicant, and it's also more flexible for the county in future application. So at the Planning Commission public hearing, the city did submit a comment, and they were in support of option 2. And their comments that they've submitted most closely aligns with the Planning Commission recommendation, which I will go through shortly. So the public comments we received, 5 were in support of option 1 and 2 were in support of option 2. We did not receive any public comment on that third option, which didn't meet the applicant's need. Comments in support of option 1 noted that it's at the heart of the request of the church and it would best fit their needs. And the comments in support of option 2, one of those was from the City of Olympia. They noted that these types of uses most often occur in residential areas, so it is appropriate to include regulatory language on the size and scale of dorms. And the other comment that we received in support of option 2 referenced the City of Olympia's comment and agreed with their concerns. And then there was only one oral comment at the public hearing, again in support of option 2. So looking at the Planning Commission recommendation, the Planning Commission did recommend option 2 as presented, and they modified that option to only limit the size and the scale of dorms by requiring them to be accessory to the principal use on site and to not include hard number on square footage, beds, or room numbers. So that modified option 2, the code language for that is included in the Planning Commission recommendation, which begins on page 3. The actual code language probably begins on page 5 of the attachments handout. And what that option does is it expands the zones where dormitories can occur to R4 and R4 to 8, which includes the applicant's property, but it also includes regulatory language that limits the size and scale of the dorms permitted in those areas by requiring it to be accessory to the principal use on site in size, scale, and function. And as I mentioned previously, the Planning Commission recommendation really gets at what the City of Olympia was requesting by regulating size and scale, and also that accessory language better allows for future flexibility in situations where we might see an unconventional permit application come in. So the next steps on this project, if there's any additional information that the board would like, we're happy to come back. If not, the next steps for this item would be to submit an AIS to request a public hearing, and also for the board to provide direction on which options they would like included in that public hearing. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer questions and flip back through slides as needed.
I do have a question.
Commissioner Mejia, go down the line.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. My question's in regards to, it seems our planning commission decided to go with option 2, which was, I believe, the City of Olympia's recommendation too. Does that fit kind of with what the initial request was?
Yeah, that does meet the applicant's initial request. So the original application they had submitted got at more of creating a new type of use, an entirely new type of use and permit process for a boarding school. But in working with development services, they determined that the type of use that they would really like to apply for is a dormitory. So we didn't need to go through the process of creating a whole new use or permit process in the county code. And option 2 does meet their needs. The only difference is that it would have that limitation on size, scale, and function. So.
Thank you.
Sure.
I guess Commissioner Mejia pretty much covered everything I'm interested in, but so everybody's going to be happy if we go with option 2. Basically.
It will meet the applicant's needs, and it's more flexible for future situations where they might come in. The only requirement would be that their dormitory that they choose to put on the property is accessory to their church that is already existing on the property. So there would be some size and scale limitations, and they would be able to work through that through their permit plan for the permit.
I just wanted to clarify I'm getting it right, but I vote with Olympia and the Planning Commission. So.
Yeah, and I similarly want to get it right. So I didn't quite understand when on slide number 9, when you talk about the city's comment, you said that there was 2 possibilities. One was to have this language about it must be accessory, but the other one was about setting particular square foot limits and stuff. So was I to understand the City of Olympia did not want to see those limits, or they were indifferent to those limits, or I didn't quite catch your characterization of that?
Yeah, I think indifferent is probably a better word for it. It's not that they did not want that included. It's just that the city felt that only including accessory language allowed for more flexibility in future situations, not only for applicants, but for the county to process those applications, because there could be situations where we see, an unconventional permit type come in where, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but we could certainly see something come in the future, and that allows for more flexibility to address that, as opposed to a square footage limit.
Now, option 1 says, okay, option 2, it says same as 1. So we are talking about a place of worship only.
That's correct.
And if we're talking about something else that wants to add a dorm onto it, no go, because we're limiting this change to places of worship.
That's correct. So the zones R4 and R4 to 8 that are proposed to expand dormitories to is only for places of worship. So, if you had a school that came in and was on one of those properties, they wouldn't be able to do it.
We're going to vote the same.
It sounds like it.
So the take that, I can probably bring this for Tuesday. I think the question for the board is, I assume they desire to continue with the process that will be to have staff set the public hearing. But the underlying question will be, what of the options you'd like to bring forth for the public to comment? Options, all three options, or just option number 2?
I'm option number 2, just to kind of expedite the process.
Just option 2. Sounds like they're consensus.
Just the planning commission recommendation?
Yes.
Yeah. That Olympia agrees with. Sounds like.
So there you go, Maya, submit an AIS, setting a public hearing. They will be focused on option 2.
I can't hardly believe we can have 2 things right now.
I will prepare that and bring it forward. Thank you.
Hasn't been a
Thank you,
practice
good job.
pattern like that. Thank you, Maya. Thanks, Josh.
Thank you.
And we've got a 7-minute break.
Woo, woo.
Hear more about the cows.
That does sound pretty interesting.